Hi everyone, thanks for watching. You can support our work on our website ageoftruth.tv. And please like our videos, subscribe to our channels on YouTube, BitChute and Brighteon. And remember to hit the bell for notifications. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook. To be sure not to miss any of our shows, you can sign up for our newsletter on our website ageoftruth.tv.
Hello, Jerry. Can you hear me?
Hey there. Yeah, I can hear you. I was wondering whether I got the wrong time or not.
No, you're right. Yes.
I think you're going to find this very interesting.
I think so too. I've really been looking forward to it. Yes.
Yeah, he's you know, the psychiatric mafia says you can't recover from schizophrenia. You just got to, it's a life sentence. You got to take these toxic pills for the rest of your life. He's living proof that these voices are entities and that you can recover. So he's an engineer, he's got a job, he's got a family, he's doing well.
Wow. I think it's 5 years ago since we have you on last time.
Wow.
Yes.
That's a long time.
Yeah, a lot has happened. So.
Oh, here he is. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Thank you for joining.
Oh, it's my pleasure. How do you pronounce your name, by the way?
It's a Nordic Danish name. It's a Lauke.
Lauge. Okay.
Yes, very good, very good. Absolutely.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Age of Truth TV. I'm Lucas Alexander in Copenhagen, Denmark. Our two special guests today are joining us from Arizona and from New Jersey in America. One is a gentleman that prefers to go by the name Anon to protect his identity. He is a former recovered schizophrenic and has a remarkable story to tell, and he is willing to share that with the audience today. The other is a gentleman that has been with us before. He is a psychotherapist, having worked with psychiatric patients, schizophrenics, and the criminally insane in prisons for 35 years. He claims that dark demonic entities, demons and archons, take over, invade, and possess the minds of schizophrenics. We have so much to share today with Jerry Marsinsky and Anon. Good evening from Copenhagen, Denmark, and welcome to our viewers on Age of Truth TV. Please like our videos, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for notifications. We have a really fascinating and mind-blowing episode for you today with two gentlemen joining us, one from Tucson, Arizona, and the other from New Jersey on the East Coast of America. One has been with us before. We did an absolutely amazing and very informative episode with Jerry Marsinsky about 5 or 6 years ago that you all must watch. It's a lot of information about his 35 years in the psychiatric system as a psychotherapist, working with psychiatric patients, schizophrenia, and the criminally insane in prisons. And he, of course, talks about demons possessing these people, and those are the voices that they hear in their minds. That's demonic entities, and there's so much to get into here. But we're also joined by a recovered schizophrenic. He goes under the name Anon Omous, and he has written a book called Revelations on Interstellar Highway 10, a recovered schizophrenic in his mid-20s, and he's joining us right now. And for to protect himself, he's using the name Anon. So, and he's very brave. He wants to tell his story. It's very startling, very eye-opening. So I want to say welcome on the show, Anon, and of course to Jerry Marsinsky.
Good to be back.
Great. And then Anon, thank you for joining us from New Jersey.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. We have a lot to get into, and I'm sure you can lead the way. But first of all, I want to ask Jerry. So hearing voices in your head, is that always schizophrenia, or can that be something else like being targeted individuals, being attacked electronically by some kind of voice or voice to skull technique or directed energy weapons or something?
Well, I do believe they have those things, but everybody hears voices in their head all the time. Nobody ever asks where they come from. The difference between, somebody who's normal and somebody who's schizophrenic is the frequency and the content of those voices. So everybody, you walk down the street and all of a sudden you get this horrible thought in your head to whack the guy in front of you, or to push somebody who butted in front of you in the line and kick his butt or something. I mean, everybody has those kind of thoughts, but a schizophrenic has them all the time. So it's like these entities that kind of, they jump in there and take over. So what happens is that they go after the most wounded in the society, people who've been terribly physically, sexually, mentally abused, and they're putting out that negative kind of vibration. They're attracted to that. And then they jump in there and they just kind of pour gasoline on the fire, and they feed off of the negative emotion that those thoughts generate. Now, one of the tricks they use is, oh yeah, you're a targeted individual and that there's nothing you can do about it, and you're incurable because it's coming from the government. That, a lot of times that's what they're telling the person. They want them to feel hopeless and helpless. And I've had, when I was working in the psychology department of a large state prison, a couple of prisoners were just as curious about what the voices were as I was. And they just came out and asked them. They said, "Who are you? What are you?" They said, "We are you." If you believe that, you're done. Because that's exactly what psychiatry wants you to believe. That's what they want these patients to believe, that their brain is broken, there's a chemical imbalance. So they went from blaming it on mothers, and when that didn't pan out, then they went to genetics, and they said it's a genetic abnormality. When the geneticist showed, hey, we have no genetic marker, they went out and they said, oh, well, it's not just one gene, it's a whole bunch of genes all mixed together, and we'll find it eventually, but we know it's genetics. The genetics guys never found anything. So now Eli Lilly came out in the 70s when they came out with Prozac, the drug company, and just declared that schizophrenia and mental illness was due to a chemical imbalance in the person's brain. They had no proof of it at the time. It was a complete lie. They put it out generically, they advertised it as that, and they're teaching it in the universities right now. There's no evidence for that at all, and it's been disproved over and over. So
have they never found any evidence whatsoever that it's caused by a biochemical imbalance in the brain?
No, that was a complete lie. It's been disproved over and over and over again. On top of that, there's no definitive laboratory test for any mental disorder. So that's one of the things.
For any mental disorder whatsoever.
No, they have no objective test for any of them. They made this stuff, that the whole DSM is completely made up. It's completely fabricated. It looks like a scientific work when you open it up, and here's these categories and subcategories and all that kind. There's not a single test for any one of those either.
Yeah, no chemical tests, no blood work tests, or anything like that.
No objective test of any kind. There's no laboratory test. There's no EEG, no EKG. that the DSM was completely concocted, and it describes a series of classifications of behavior. And the committee of psychiatrists who concocted it, 2/3 of them are involved with big pharma. So they make these mental illnesses up, and they got some crazy ones, and then they try to manufacture some toxic drug to treat them.
But
So
the
none of
system
these,
is still treating people as if it is, of course, a biochemical imbalance in the brain, and they're giving them all of these drugs and all of that, and we'll get into all of that as well. But
yeah,
I mean, people are mentally not healthy. That we know, and there are many different forms of mental health, well, issues, as you just
mental
mentioned,
illness.
and schizophrenia. But are those always, well, demonic possession, and people
No,
are being attacked by demons?
no, no. Schizophrenia, for the most part, I believe is. It's either what we call a negative identity in MACE or these entities. And they're not nice, and they run patterns. The first pattern I noticed is they're consistently negative. They're always negative. They don't say anything good. And here's psychiatry going, oh yeah, it's a hallucination. Now, hallucinations are random. They're all over the place. They're positive, they're negative, they're neutral, they're all over. You can't predict a hallucination. These patterns that these voices run are consistently and persistently repeatable and predictable. They're negative. They're anti-religious. They hate the Bible. They hate people going to church. They can't stand the 23rd Psalm. They can't stand the 91st Psalm. They hate preachers. They hate anything to do with God or Jesus. What kind of hallucination would do that?
But you
Why?
don't have
What?
to be a schizophrenic to not like the Bible and not be part of that religious system, obviously. That's been
Well,
used for
right. That
control and
doesn't
mind control.
right. That doesn't mean you're schizophrenic, but it is a pattern that these voices run, along with the negativity. So why is it, why are those voices consistently negative? Why aren't they random like regular hallucinations? Why aren't they all over the place? No, they're consistently negative. They don't say anything good at all unless, and if they do, they'll come around and stab you in the back later. They also drain your energy. So it's like after these voices attack people, they're energetically drained. They have no energy left. And that's
So there's no
consistent
evidence
also.
of people having a positive message from some of these voices. So what about we also hear about those people that have this direct connection to God, God speaking through them, and they're very selected, and they even cult leaders, some cult leaders also, they may be lying, right? But I mean, they might also be attacked by demons or whatever, pretending to be the voice of God. But I mean,
Yes.
we've met these people that have this, and everybody. So God talks through a lot of people, or are they schizophrenics? Some of
Well,
those
that
messages are nice.
yeah, well that depends. See, if they're consistently positive and helpful, it's not these things. These things are destructive. They're evil and they're destructive. Now, I had one patient when in the prison again. He fully recovered from these voices. We got him fully cured, and his mother, who was deceased, came back and he said, "Hey, my mother wants to speak to you." And he was telling me that the entire time that we were working together, and I always would check. I said, "Well, has your mother ever told you anything negative? Has she said anything bad or anything that upset you?" And it was always negative. No, no. Well, I said, "What'd she tell you?" She says, "Well, wear clean underwear and take your shower and stay away from the bad guys and don't use drugs." I mean, the kind of stuff a mother would say, and it was always consistent that way. And at the end, after he recovered, one of the last sessions I had with him, he said, "My mother wants to talk to you." And that never happened to me before. So I asked him, "Well, what's she got to say?" And he says, "She thanks you for helping me." And I asked her, I said, "What are you doing over there?" She says, "I'm checking people in." And then I went to ask her another question, and she said, "I'm not supposed to be talking to you. All your answers that you need are in the Bible." And that was the last time I heard from her.
Hmm.
So he
So
he was
can you distinguish between voices in your head or your own sane mind and thoughts that you have in your own head? I mean, do you know when it's parasitic entities or demons invading
Virtually,
you?
virtually every negative thought that you have going through your mind is put there by them.
All of them, but we all have negative thoughts at some
Yeah, we all
point.
have negative thoughts, unless there's some situation, but then they try to pour gasoline on the fire. Maybe a
They
negative
amplify. If you have
situation.
negative thoughts, they will amplify them.
Yes. They'll plug in there and it's like they'll supercharge the negativity that's always there, already there. And then they feed off of the negative emotion that they generate, So,
So
you
none of
know,
our thoughts are our own, really. There's
and Emanuel Swedenborg, a Christian mystic who lived I think it was 300 years ago, he was the chief mining engineer for the Queen of Sweden. At the age of 50, Christ showed up and said, okay, stop all this scientific stuff. I'm going to give you access to heaven and hell. I want you to go interview the people there and then write a book so people can see what heaven and hell are like. And he did that. He spent the rest of his life writing these books. The first one that he wrote was called Heaven and Hell by Emanuel Swedenborg. And it's the interviews with these entities. So that's where the first time that I came, and also Dr. Wilson Van Dusen, who I was working with for maybe a year, he wrote a book called The Presence of Other Worlds. Both of us noticed that the demons that Emanuel Swedenborg was describing in his book matched exactly what these schizophrenic voices were telling people and what they were doing, what they were acting. It was the same thing. Now he tried to make friends with them, so he tried to make friends with them to try to get more information out of them. They didn't give him a whole lot more information, but what was interesting is he was a clinical psychologist. He worked at a state hospital up in Northern California, Eureka, and he did have one patient where he said, okay, I want to give an MMPI, which is the gold standard psychological test, to the voices alone, and I want to give it to the patient alone. So he said, just don't answer the questions for the voices. Let them answer the test themselves, and then I'm going to give you one separate, and you keep the voices out. The results were that the voices were much more psychotic than the client, than the patient.
So you said something before that's very interesting, and I had a question about that as well, and we can also ask Anon about this. Talk about the voices and the demons versus intrusive thoughts, which we all experience. I mean, is that all on the spectrum, so to speak, like
Yes,
impulsive thoughts like I
yes,
could throw coffee in that person's face
right.
right now. I could hit that person or even kill that person. And
That's
everybody
them.
gets like, "Oh my God, that's so terrible. I shouldn't have. Why
Yeah,
do I feel like this? Or why do I have that thought?" I mean,
yeah.
it happens to everybody if you talk
Yes,
to
it
them.
happens to everybody, and that's them.
They test.
But
They test. I mean, they're kind of like sharks. They're looking for wounds or way to get into cracks in your psyche. So they'll throw those thoughts into you sometimes. Depending on how you react to them, they decide if they're going to continue on or do more of it too. So if you're susceptible to them, they'll come in and attack even more. And I think what separates a schizophrenic from somebody who normally has some intrusive thoughts is that with the schizophrenic, the intrusive thoughts, they drown out your normal thinking.
they're
You can't even
uncontrolled.
think.
They can't
I mean,
control
you
them.
can't even like think of like to put on your socks or add or subtract or do mathematics because these intrusive thoughts so dominate in your head. It's like noise, it's like having speakers inside your brain.
So
Yeah,
it
they're
happens to everybody. I mean, it happens to
happens to
everybody.
everybody.
And they're trying to get in
Yes,
there, but
they're
they
testing.
can't. But for a schizophrenic person, it happens all the time, and there could be many voices, right? Multiple voices
Yes,
speaking.
I've spoken to patients who had hundreds of voices. Those guys weren't going to recover. The more voices they hear, the worse off, the deeper they are.
And does it come
So
from the same source, or archonic source,
yes,
or
yeah.
demonic source, or is it like many different types of demons?
Well, I know they have there there's different types. I know that, but they have a what do you call it?
Hierarchy. Yeah, there's a hierarchy.
Hierarchy. There's a hierarchy. I had one girl that her voices weren't mean enough, so the hierarchy, the bosses took that voice out and put a meaner one in there. So that there are hierarchies.
Do you think in any way, I just thought about this. Do you think it could be linked to AI, the superbrain computer? I'm not talking about the earthly AI that we're using here, Chat GPT and all of those things, but I mean this superbrain computer that they talk about, that there is this universal or galactic AI, artificial intelligence source or frequency.
My gut feeling is not. These things are more individual entities. You know, they have their kind of personalities. Some are smart, some are very sly and deceptive. I mean, they're just incredibly sly and deceptive. I mean, it's the complexity of how deceptive they are is just mind-boggling. And then there's the whole range that goes down to kind of different areas of intelligence, all the way down to dumb ones, where there was one that all he would do would say, "Hey, hey, hey," to the client, and the patient was just going, "I wonder if he means hey like the horses eat, or is he trying to get my attention?"
I mean,
Have
there's
you
alternate.
ever? Oh,
I was going to
sorry.
say
Go on.
there's alternate realms of existence, and there's good entities, neutral entities, bad entities. It could be entities that just have bad moods some days and better moods on other days. But there are alternate realms of existence, and sometimes these entities will interact with us humans, us mere mortals, and depending on the situation.
Yeah,
So I
and
don't.
there's also lost souls that are just they're not evil. They're just they haven't made the transition. There was one that he was asked, "Well, why haven't you made the transition?" And he said, "Because my wife and my girlfriend are up there, and I don't want to get in the middle of that. I'm going to stay here."
Okay, yeah, like a limbo situation or something,
Yeah,
or they haven't really come to terms with the fact that they're not in the
y-
three-dimensional
right.
reality.
They haven't come to the idea yet that they're dead because in their view they still have a body, but nobody's hearing them. Nobody's paying attention to them. Nobody can see them. You know, and there was one patient I remember again. He was in the prison. He was a motorcycle rider, and he got killed on his motorcycle, and he floated up out of his body, and he didn't know what to do then. He saw another guy riding a motorcycle on the other side of the highway, and he jumped into him.
But how can it actually be confusing if you're not in the body anymore and you can see everything from a different perspective, above or whatever? You can see maybe yourself or your own body. Why is that confusing to a soul?
Well, because you still have the same thoughts, you still have the same spiritual body, but nobody's listening to you. Nobody's responding to you. You try to get their attention, you try to talk to them, and they just act like you're not there. They haven't figured out yet that they're dead.
And they're not being sucked into this life review or this portal of this so-called heavenly realm or whatever you believe in that may also be a hijack. We've talked a lot about that on
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
the soul
more and more
chat.
information on that is coming out. And they got some pretty good points. It's like if they delete your entire memory every lifetime, what's the purpose of going down there and making up for all these mistakes that you made if they completely wash your memory?
So they can feed on you some more.
The reincarnation trap. You hear a lot
Yeah,
about
yes.
that out there.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that for years on this channel and with different speakers, and it's an important thing, and it's important to be aware of, so you can make another decision and become as enlightened about that topic as possible. But just before maybe you introduce Anon to people and go on from there a little bit, and I have more questions later on, I just want to ask you, Jerry, have you ever fully um, treated and cured a schizophrenic person so that they fully 100% recovered?
Yes, several times, maybe a dozen or so. And there's a group of us now that are working with MAZE, this energetic psychotherapy, where we're getting some decent results. I'd say probably uh, 30 to 40% of the people we work with completely recover, with no medicines.
That's amazing, and it's also important, but it's still a very sort of small percentage compared to so many people you've tried to treat, and you
Yeah,
were around for 35 years, right?
but it's a lot better than psychiatry is doing. Virtually nobody is recovering from their toxic drugs that they're poisoning people with. And they're lying to people on top of that. They say your brain is broken. You have to take these toxic drugs for the rest of your life. You got a chemical balance in your imbalance in your brain, which is a friggin' lie. There is no chemical imbalance. They have no test to test for it. They don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be. It's a complete deception, along with their DSM and all these psychiatric diagnoses. There's no test for any of those either.
So the drugs are doing more harm than good.
Well, what they do is they're major tranquilizers. Okay, so they want to keep these psychiatric people under control, especially in the psych hospitals, where the attendant staff are and the staff working in the big psych hospitals are just, they're overwhelmed with psychiatric patients. So they want to dumb them down. And what they're treating is symptoms. They're not getting at the cause at all. They're just treating symptoms. And nobody's recovering from that. Now, what happens is sometimes these drugs will suppress the voices far enough to where they disappear, but as soon as they go off the drugs, or the voices come back. So they're not curing anybody with
And
anything.
nobody within the mental health system is acknowledging or even, uh, I mean, they don't even talk about the possibility of this
No,
being demonic entities. And you
no,
were
they're
axed from working in the system, right? Because you
well.
started talking about it and tried to address the demons, right?
Yes, when uh, prisoners started recovering, a couple of things happened. At about 3 o'clock in the morning, every time one recovered, that the next night I was crushed down in my bed by something that I couldn't see. I could feel it. My whole body was being crushed. That happened every time one of them recovered. So they knew where I lived, which amazed me.
The
Um,
demons.
the demons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
And,
amazing. And also, people should really see our first show that we did with you 5 years ago because it was very amazing. But I'd like you to introduce our guest here, Anon, today, because you're a recovered schizophrenic when you were in your mid-20s. But let's hear your story, and please, Jerry, take it away.
yeah, I've been studying these voices for decades. Okay, they are entities. They run patterns. They're negative. They're anti-religious. They create and foster negative emotion. They energetically drain their victims. And there's 23 total patterns. Now, those of you working with schizophrenics or working in mental health centers and psychiatry, especially, since you guys aren't going to wake up until the next century, probably, to go to my website, go to at jerrymarsinsky.com, go to articles, and under articles is a list of these patterns. Okay, and just print them off and ask your schizophrenic clients if these patterns pertain to them, and they'll tell you yes. These things are running patterns, they're not hallucinations like the psychiatric mafia says. Hallucinations don't run patterns. On top of that, the psychiatric mafia hasn't done, and neither has Big Pharma, and they're not interested in it. They're making $14.7 billion a year, billion, not million, $1 billion a year selling these toxic antipsychotic drugs that are actually doing neurological damage with long-term use. So they're not curing anything. Um,
Yeah,
and
the drugs are fine for maybe, I'd say, 6 to 9 months because that's the only way you can reach some of these patients. I mean, the drugs
right,
have their place, but Big Pharma, they want you to be on it for the rest of your life, and you don't
right,
need to be. They take the approach that schizophrenia cannot be cured. That's false. So the drugs have their place, but just really for the short term, not for the long term use.
yeah, and with long-term use, they've done some autopsies on patients that were in psychiatric hospitals, state psychiatric hospitals, and the autopsies shown that those that were on these antipsychotic drugs for years showed significant shrinking of their brain. So this is neurological damage, permanent neurological damage being done by these drugs. So what psychiatry is doing is telling these poor patients there is no hope. There is no cure. The only thing you could do is take these toxic drugs for the rest of your life. You know, it's a very dark prognosis. There's a lot of people who have recovered, including Anon here. You know, with he went through it. They drugged him. They shocked him. He can tell you the story of what he went through, and also what he experienced with the entities. So
Yes,
you
we'd
know,
love to hear that, Anon. Please share your story and what got you to where you are now.
Oh, happy to do so. So whenever I hear Jerry talk about, the things that he encountered, it stirs up memories. He's like, yep, he's right. Yep, that's what happened. I mean, he's definitely onto something with the patterns and how these entities go after people. So I have a very rational mindset. I mean, I graduated from college with a degree in mechanical engineer. I did actually take some courses on psychology and abnormal psychology. So I was well aware of DSM and the classification of schizophrenia, manic, bipolar, all those sorts of things. So when I graduated college, I was probably in my mid-20s. This was going back to about 1989, 1990. I wanted to read the Bible on my own because I had some time. I was out of college. I just kind of want to see what it had to say without any middle person preaching it to me. So I had a religious background. It wasn't anything overly dogmatic or anything like that. I was baptized Greek Orthodox. I attended a Methodist Sunday school later on. And then in my teenage years, I was part of a Roman Catholic youth group. And I mean, we do the usual things in class, like color Noah's Ark with crayons and that sort of thing. So I had a religious core to my upbringing, not in the dogmatic sense, but just the idea of a sense of morality or ethics, however subjective that may be, and a belief that there is something greater than just our material body. But I wasn't into the occult. I didn't really believe in demons or anything like that at the time, or archons.
I didn't either.
I didn't even know what the word archon was until recent years, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, when I started off, I didn't either. I was completely.
So I started to read the Bible on my own, from start to finish. I was questioning the God of the Old Testament, a lot of the things in there. I'm saying, this doesn't seem like a very nice God. I mean, I was questioning things. I said, something's off here.
Yeah.
And I remember I started to do thought experiments too, that, what if I myself am an aspect of divinity trapped in a mortal framework? I mean, I was doing a lot of spiritual exploration in my head. And I admit, at times I felt Christ-like, but I didn't quite know what to do those sensations. And part of me was thinking, like, what makes me different from any other nut job out there saying, oh, I feel like Christ, or that sort of thing. So I didn't quite know how to process that, but there were times where I felt that. It's kind of like an all-knowing thing. And at the same time, I would say a lot of suppressed emotions from my childhood were coming up. I mean, I did grow up in a dysfunctional family environment. There was death, drug abuse, gaslighting, narcissism. I mean, a lot of people had a lot worse than I did, but I did go through some of that. I think that creates cracks in one's psyche, because your reality is kind of thrown off. So a lot of anger was starting to froth forth, and I was trying to keep things in control, but it's almost like something started telling me how worthless I was, and this is all kind of happening simultaneously. How worthless I was, how I wasn't deserving of friends, what a failure I was. Your life has no future. I mean, really kind of just negative, I'd say, thoughts and voices to a degree. And I'm trying to sort through this. I mean, there was times I felt euphoric, and there's times I just felt like I was in the darkest places of hell, being dragged back and forth. So I took the approach that what was occurring in my head was kind of a spiritual battle, that there was something going on, but I wasn't quite sure. And I was probably in a state of cognitive dissonance, trying to process all the stuff that's going on. Because like I said, I have a very rational, logical mind, but I can't deny what I went through and what I encountered.
And what's interesting is a large chunk of the patients I work with the new psychotherapy we're dealing with here, their chief complaint is, I'm worthless. That's it. I'm worthless. I have no power. I have no control. I mean, just like Anon was saying, they put that into these people's heads.
So can I just jump in? What are the voices typically or generally telling the attacked patients?
Every rotten thing you can imagine. You're no good. You're worthless. You're stupid. You're ugly. Nobody likes you. Nothing's going to turn out for you.
You don't deserve to exist.
Yes. I tell them, Tell them, Anon. Tell them
Oh,
what
I
you've
mean,
heard.
anything. Almost like they're bullied. I mean, they're bullying you. They're trying to put you in an agitated state, and they would say things like, you're not worth having friends. And
Nobody likes you.
I had a pretty normal high school upbringing and everything. I mean, school, I had friends, I had people that I associated with and everything. They try and isolate you because they want your undivided attention. Sometimes they would say like, "Oh, that person's just out to get you." Like they try to make you paranoid.
Yes. They feed
And
off of that fear.
your whole reality is thrown off because I mean, I wasn't sure if these were my own thoughts at this time. I wasn't sure if these were my own thoughts or coming from something outside. I mean,
And
modern
did you not
science says
question
no,
that? And did you not question that? Because I think that's very important to talk about whether or not you thought, but this is not me. Where does this voice come from? And could you actually hear the sound of the voice?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it would fluctuate. I mean, I kept going back and forth whether this was something just my head, my mind playing tricks on me, or if this was a true spiritual attack or something from the outside coming at me.
And what's so tricky? What's so tricky about it is these voices sound just like the thousands of other thoughts that go through your mind on a regular day, except their intent and their content is very different.
So it is like so it's a thought in your head, like we have thoughts in our head.
Like you have thoughts in your head all the time.
It's not a sound of a male voice sounding demonic or a woman.
Well, I wouldn't say it sounds demonic. At the lowest levels, it would just sound like your own thoughts. But if they start getting more aggressive or they feel like they're getting more control of you, it will sound like other voices in your head. The thoughts are turning into, I'd say, more stronger voices.
Yeah, or they move outside the head and they're speaking to them from a location outside of their head. That's when they feel they have control and they don't have to worry about you, thing. But for the most part, they sound just like the thousands of other thoughts that go through your head on a regular day.
Outside of your head, it sounds like somebody is in the room talking to them or behind them.
Yeah, right next to their ear, whispering in their ear, talking to them.
Correct.
I mean, when that happens, are you then so far out because of the other thoughts that seem like to be like your own thoughts that you cannot distinguish that this is not real, this is the voice with a sound to the voice that you just don't know? That's
I'm going to jump ahead here if you don't mind. I mean, when I was in the psychiatric hospital, I remember a few nights there where those thoughts got so intense in the attacks. It was a cacophony of all different voices. It was like men's, women's, and they were just attacking, saying negative things. I would try to block them out. And I remember one of the voices distinctly saying, "What are we going to do about him?" And it was almost like if you're in a movie theater about to see a play or a movie's about to start, there's conversations among the audience before the movie starts. That's kind of what it felt like. I could hear all these multiple conversations going on. And at times it felt like it was outside my head. And I was just battling them. I wasn't going to let them win or take over. And eventually the voices, it seemed like a committee of 9. There was a committee about 7, then a committee about 5. Like the others would branch off. But it was almost like this huge, just a bombardment, like trying to take control of me. This is what it felt like.
And you were not able to say, this is not real, this is not happening, nobody is here, it's happening in my mind. You were not able to think clearly like that, like maybe you are now, if, something would happen.
I was on the fence. I was going back and forth. Some days were worse, some days were better. And I didn't tell, like the psychiatrics and the medical professionals in the psychiatric hospital where I ended up, they would ask me often, "Are you hearing voices?" And I would always give them the caveat, well, sort of, it's just my mind playing tricks on me. I didn't want to get into what the voices, what really was going on, because I felt like this is something that I had to deal with. And I didn't quite want to tell them because I didn't know how they're going to look at me or approach me or deal with me.
They would have drugged you silly. They would have just increased your drugs until you were drooling, in the corner.
No, I went through part of that. So, yeah.
Can I ask both of you, or am I right in assuming that you always suffer from paranoia when you're schizophrenic, but you can have paranoia and not be schizophrenic?
Oh yeah, yeah. But usually the thoughts that drive the paranoia are these entities. All right.
But you can have paranoia without being schizophrenic.
Yeah. Oh sure, yeah.
But how does that work?
Well, you're just not taken over by it. You might have run into a bad situation at work, and your boss is threatening you, and you're paranoid over that particular situation. But
But
it
that's the
doesn't
real
keep.
thing. That's the
That's
real
the
thing.
real. That's the
It's
real.
not an
That's the
imaginary thing in your head.
right. Right. But it's hard to tell the difference because they sound just like the thousands of other thoughts that go through your mind, and they're very convincing. They're it's like you can tell by the intent. The intent is always negative. It's always destructive.
Hmm.
And
It is tough to tell because I mean, there's times where you can be paranoid that your coworkers are out to get you, and sometimes they are. And how
yeah,
do you sort through that? That's what I'm saying. Being in that schizophrenic condition, your reality is so thrown off, you're not sure what you can trust, and that farther puts you in an agitated state, which these entities love to feed off of. So they're just trying to agitate you any way they can to generate negative emotions within you, fear, anxiety,
right.
paranoia,
That's their food.
and
And
I think that
it's more it spreads out into the person's entire life. They have what they call ideas of reference, where the schizophrenic might be walking down the sidewalk and some guys standing on the corner crack a joke and they start laughing. And all of a sudden the voices tell them, hey, they're laughing at you. They're watching you. I remember one patient, he had voices that he heard speaking behind his head, and they were talking about how they were going to murder him, what method they were going to use to kill him, and they were debating that. So it's always to generate that negative emotional energy, which is what they feed off of. They call it loosh.
yeah.
Yeah, Loosh, obviously.
That
So can it
that's
happen
their
to
food.
everybody?
I think they test everybody, and
Yes.
those that like vultures or sharks, as I said, and if they're testing, and if they can get in, and they feel like their target has enough cracks that they can get into their mind or psyche, they will come in with even more attacks.
Is it basically people that were, let's say, battered or had a hard upbringing or sensitive people, or I don't know,
Well, well,
star
they hit
children, whatever?
they are attracted to a negative mindset. So like shark smells blood, the shark will move toward they move toward a negative mindset. People who are physically, emotionally, or sexually abused badly, they're thinking negatively. Their world is negative. They move on those guys first. But there was one time where I was in the backyard here in the desert. We don't grow grass. There's not enough water, so we take a machete and go out in the backyard and just whack down the cactus so they don't take over everything. So I was in the backyard whacking down the cactus with a machete in my hand, and my dog runs by. He's a beautiful white husky, and she wasn't bothering me. She wasn't doing anything bad, and I have the machete in my hand up, ready to cut some more cactus, and this thought just barges through my mind like a lightning bolt. It said, "Cut her head off," and I'm like, "Whoa, where did that come from?" And here I'm standing there with the machete, with a thought like that in my head. And I knew it wasn't me, but it upset me anyway. Just to have that thought upset me. And they were feeding off of that. It was like a one-shot hit, like taking a shot of whiskey for them. It's like, oh yeah, we upset him. We got a little bit out of him. It was upsetting to have that kind of thought.
So I
That's,
think
of
that
course, very upsetting, but I'm just thinking that it's interesting, I think, for people listening to you two to understand how can it happen, to whom can it happen? To everybody, or is it more the sensitive, like you said, people that were sexually abused or beaten or whatever, could be more.
Well, the other thing that I've seen is methamphetamine. I've seen more people go crazy on methamphetamine than any other drug out there. The prisoners called it the devil's drug. And what happens? They're feeling great. They're feeling like Superman. They got lots of energy. They've been taking it. They're eating a lot of it. Some of them start off with Ritalin and then move up to that and end up in prison. So here's where they're drugging the kids, and it's not having a good effect.
So
Um,
Ritalin that you take for
ADHD,
ADHD, for example,
Ritalin,
which is
Adderall,
speed, right?
Atarax.
Which is speed.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
can also possibly trigger schizophrenia. And of course, we've heard people taking LSD and maybe mushrooms. I don't know if you have any evidence of that or what type of drug or mind expanding drugs that can trigger this to open this vortex to get all these demons in there to possess your mind?
Well, I think alcohol, I think a lot of those drugs out there, some of the mushrooms, it's not all of them. I mean, it's a balance, but I think a person can have a predisposition to those opening up, I guess, bad voids or writing in bad entities if they do take those drugs. It removes certain natural boundaries I think we have around our minds. Yes, and as far as who these entities attack, it can quite often, it is somebody coming from a dysfunctional family, but primarily I would say that's who they're going after, those going after dysfunctional environments. But they will go after empaths and others that may be a threat to them, like maybe a future saint or somebody like that. So they will attack a variety of people from different backgrounds, but primarily I would say it is from people from dysfunctional family situations.
And that's also what happened to you, Anon.
Yeah. I mean, I think because I had a strong sense of faith within me, and so just continuing on with my story, I mentioned how they kept attacking, and I was getting very, very depressed. I mean, being told how worthless I am. I'm trying to get on with my life. I just graduated college. I'm trying to find a job. We were in a recession then, so I was in a car accident. Everything was falling apart. It just felt like my world was disintegrating. And at the same time, a lot of these negative emotions are being stirred up in me. Like a lot of anger was coming out, and I was like, where's this coming from? It just seemed odd. And I got to be very, very depressed. There's a bunch of other stuff going on. I don't have time to go into all the details, but what happened is I think I was on a little bit of lithium later on to deal with what I was dealing with. And I remember my body started thrashing all over the place. And if I didn't have such a scientific mindset, I would almost say that something was trying to take over my body, that it was like a possession was occurring. So I ended up in the emergency room of a local hospital, and they conducted all these tests. I think they did an MRI to see if it was neurological. They did blood work to see if it was a lithium overdose. And I was barely taking the lithium because there were so many intrusive thoughts. I couldn't even think of what time it was during the day. I couldn't remember to even do things. I mean, I could not add 2 + 2 together or do my checkbook. I mean, that's how bad it got with these thoughts just dominating, taking over. So I ended up in the emergency room, and they did tests, and they concluded that it was psychological for the body thrashes and the body movements that were occurring, not that it was neurological. So I was transferred to a psychiatric hospital. Spent about 4 weeks there. It was in the early autumn of 1990. And it was no picnic. I mean, I remember they give you all sorts of drugs to try and snap you out of your condition. I mean, I was in the most bottom. I was in a bottomless pit. I mean, I was just so full of despair, and I'm not sure how I was appearing on the outside. I do remember being in the lobby one time and walking, and I would walk right into a wall, and I would keep walking, and because I couldn't find the train of thought to turn my body and go in a different direction. And I remember laughing at this thing, how stupid this looks. And everybody in the lobby see me walking to the wall and just keep walking. But it was almost like something else was taking over my body. And I couldn't get the thoughts in to move my muscles to turn in a different direction. And in the psychiatric hospital, you're a guinea pig as far as the medicines go. I mean, they give me all sorts of pills, pink ones, blue ones, capsules, and at one octagon shape. And if one combination of pills didn't work, they try another.
Did they do any previous testing to
no, and
chemical brain imbalance?
They said the same thing, that it's a chemical imbalance. Excuse me. And I asked, being an engineer, scientific background, I asked them the question, well, what's the baseline of where the chemistry should be? I got totally blank stares because they couldn't answer the question.
They don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be. It's a complete lie. It's a deception.
But that's what they're taught by the pharmaceutical industry. Oh, it's the brain chemical imbalance. That's what these drugs do. And no,
they're programmed to believe that.
The drugs I found were tranquilizers, because I remember all the internal thoughts were still going on in my head. I was still dealing with whatever these entities were saying, but I couldn't respond to the outside world with what was occurring. And these drugs are not fun. You would not take them for recreational use. I mean, I remember some of the side effects at times were, I remember I had very dry mouth. Some mornings I woke up, my feet felt like I had 50-pound weights on them. I could barely lift up my feet. I remember one time turning my head this way, and the scene of what I was looking at would shift. in increments, go to catch up. I turned my head the other way. It would go like this. There were a few days in the psychiatric hospital. I don't even remember. I think because the drugs had just so kind of wiped me out. I didn't know what was going on. And I hated being on the drugs. And I do remember some of the staff kept asking me, what's your name? Every day they'd ask me what my name was. And I was getting a little frustrated because it was like, okay, you have my case file there. Shouldn't you know what my name is by now? But then it dawned on me. They weren't asking what my name was for their sake. They were asking it for my sake to see if I had still associated myself with whatever my name was on my birth certificate. So they were just trying to confirm that I hadn't thought it was somebody else or something different. So I never really went into the details of what the voices were saying when I was in the hospital. They don't ask you what the voices are saying either. And I think I met with the psychiatrist, might have been 20 minutes a day. And it was just kind of like, to put you on a different drug just to see how it's working. There was some group counseling there. I remember that sort of helped. But nothing was really snapping me out of my condition or state. It was almost like, if you remember the old vinyl records, I was almost like a needle was stuck in a groove, and I couldn't get out of that groove. It's like I was in such a state of despair. I'm hearing these negative voices saying all this stuff, trying to say that my life isn't worth living. I mean, I remember one time them saying, "Oh, so you think you're some sort of Christ figure? Huh, aren't you an idiot?" I mean, they would say all this sort of stuff, and here it is that part of me had that sensation of being Christ-like, and here I'm hearing voices. I mean, I couldn't get my grounding of what was going on. So it got to the end of the stay in the psychiatric hospital. My health insurance was running out. None of the drugs were working. I mean, I must have gone through at least 40 or 60 different combinations of pills over that 4-week period. So the next and final resort was electroconvulsive therapy, or shock treatment as it's known as. So what they do is they basically shock the brain. They put probes on your scalp, and they have to give you a muscle relaxant because of the electric shock going across your brain. You will convulse, and you can break bones, snap ligaments, and they also give you a muscle relaxant so it prevents you from breaking those bones and snapping ligaments. But the problem is the muscle relaxant is so potent, you can't move your diaphragm anymore, so you can't breathe. So they actually have to give you a respirator as well during it. And I remember that they gave me my first treatment, and they said I would have some short-term memory loss from it. But I remember after the very first treatment, I felt a heck of a lot better. I mean, I was still at rock bottom, but the voices, my mind was calm. The voices weren't there anymore. And I was thinking to myself, okay, I can rebuild myself. I mean, I'm trying to start my life. I just got out of college. I want to get a job, maybe start a family one day, get out of the house, all these sort of things I was trying to accomplish. So I felt like I could at least start over again after that first ECT treatment. And I told them, look, I feel a lot better. I said, no, you have to have at least 6 of them. So they gave me 5 more over a period of about 2 weeks. So I had a total of 6 in all, I believe. I think 1 or 2 were inpatient, and the remainder were outpatient.
So the voices don't like that electricity, but they're energetic beings. What I saw at this big state hospital where I was working is that those electroshocks, which were much worse than what Anon got. I mean, they were electric blasts. I mean, they were incredible. I almost fainted watching one. But that would get rid of the voices temporarily for a couple of days or so. But most of the time, maybe up to a week, most of the time they'd come back. Anon was able to break away, though. That gave him a period of time to break away. But
that's 2 or 3 months.
Fairly unusual.
But Jerry, wouldn't that suggest that possibly it is a biochemical imbalance in the brain if electroshock works on the patient, at least for a couple of days?
Well, either that or it drives away these entities for a couple of days because they don't like it.
Well, that's another point of view, but it's important to address it because then it's something that happens physically to the brain that they do with this electroshock.
Well, if it were, that electroshock would probably fire all the transmitters all at once. So it's like that ain't going to help anything. How'd you feel after you got out of there? Right after you got out?
Well, when I was released from the hospital, I mean, I was still slightly down. I felt I had the energy and the motivation to rebuild myself. Life seemed worth living again. I was ready to get on with things. I could think clearly, and I felt like, okay, I can at least start. I was at ground zero. I was still at rock bottom, but at least I felt like I could start again.
See, but that's unusual.
And the voices came back about 2 or 3 months later. I think they were regrouping. I think it was going through the hierarchy to decide what they wanted to do next with me, because it wasn't quite working. And so about 2 or 3 months later, this is approaching maybe December of 1990, the voices came back, but they were different this time. The first voice was basically offering me a path to almost instantaneous wealth, power, and fame if I had to kind of give up its soul to it. It's trying to make a Faustian bargain with me, saying, hey, if you do this, we'll give you all this power, knowledge of the universe, we'll give you fame, fortune, but it would have meant compromising my ethics, and I think I would have had to kind of almost sell my soul to it. They were offering me mammon. And believe me, I was in a broken state. I mean, I was unemployed. My income that year I was below poverty level. I'm dealing with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. I'm trying to get on with my life. So I mean, the offer of these voices or strong thoughts from me was very tempting. But I said no, because I just felt like it didn't feel like it was coming from a good source. And they were kind of upset about that. Like, they kept badgering me to take the offer. And I did not accept the offer.
But Anon, what if you had accepted the offer? Who would you go to for that wealth and fame and money?
Well,
I mean,
they would tell them.
Huh?
They would tell them how to go about getting it.
And it would have been an ethical path.
Yeah, I had them offer me a lottery ticket number once. I didn't take it either. But yeah, they would have guided him along what he had to do to get, and it probably would have been very unethical.
I might have become a techno billionaire, but I would have sold my soul in doing so.
A lot of people are offered that in real life, to become somebody important. That we've discussed a lot on the show too, obviously, in Hollywood and in other areas.
So I started going through a series of different voices. So the first one offered me mammon. Then another one came back, and I felt like it was changing. Like, the intelligence was increasing, or there was different inflections to what the voices sound like. And now I'm still going back and forth on whether this is just my mind playing tricks on me, or if there's something legitimately going on here. But so part of me is still treating it as a spiritual battle. Part of me is still on the fence with this. So they started to they'd pull up stuff from my memory and use it against me. Say, see, you're worthless. You're a worthless creature.
See, that's another thing they do. They have complete access to your memory. They can pull up every rotten thing you've ever done, throw it in your face, say, look what you did. You're a terrible person.
Do they also know things that you don't know about either your own life or somebody close to you in your family? Because if it's something you've experienced and it comes to your mind, or they're talking to you about, oh, you did this and that, then you remember and know that you did it, and then it could be your own thoughts or a biochemical imbalance. But if it's something you just don't know, or if it's something that's happened to your father or mother, you didn't know, but do they know that too?
Well, I'll tell you what I've experienced is the meth addicts, when they ran out of meth, the voices would tell them where to go and when to be there, and somebody would show up with, a stranger would show up with meth. Another guy, he would rob houses. He'd break into houses, and the voices would tell him when the people were up, when to get out of there. And there was one time where he had robbed the house, he found the loot. They told him, hey, they're up, you better get out of there. And the cops are coming. So he jumps out and he goes to turn and run up this alley to the left. They said, no, don't go there. The cops will be coming down that alley. They knew that ahead of time. And that's exactly what happened. He went into another way, and they told him a dumpster to go jump in that dumpster and hide in the dumpster. And the cop walked by with a flashlight, and he was still pretty close. And the voices are saying, okay, now get out quietly and jump and leave and run. And he's telling them, no, they're still too close. And they said, no, you go now. So he made it back to his apartment, and he left all his all the loot in the trash bucket. And the voices were appraising him, said, "You did great, you did good, you wonderful job." And he said, "Well, not so wonderful, because I left all the loot in the trash bucket where he was hiding." And they said, "Yeah, you could go in the morning and get it back. No big thing." So yeah, they know stuff. There was one guy I had where they were telling him, "Hey, listen, this guy, he was psychotic. He was a prisoner." They were telling him, "Hey, we know where there's a sesamolia pot field in Oregon. We'll show you where it is." And he trusted them. They said, "Get your $250 that you have, and we'll show you where it is." So he gets the $250. He was in San Diego, California, maybe 1,000 miles or close to it, up to Oregon. So here they are telling him every turn to make on the way to Oregon, and they're telling him to go up this dirt road, which was 20 miles or so dirt road, and then he runs into the mountain, and it ends there. So he asked the voices. He says, "Okay, the road ends. What do you want me to do?" They said, "There's a hiking trail off to your left. Just lock up your car and walk up to the left a little bit, and you'll see it." So he does, and there is a hiking trail up there. They said it's maybe an hour or two up the hiking trail. So they told him to bring with him 2 burlap bags and a machete. So he had those in his car. He hikes up that hiking trail for a few hours, and here's this giant sesamolia pot field up there. Okay, this is the same guy whose mother thanked me for helping him out. And he chops down the marijuana, and he goes, "So okay, what do I do with it now?" They tell him there's a national park just down the road on the Columbia River. Go there, you can sell it there. So he goes there and he's selling it. They're buying it. He's making a fortune, and he's buying all the prostitutes, all the alcohol, all the cocaine he could handle. But what was weird, they wanted to go fishing. And when he told me that, I said, "Nah, you're pulling my leg, man." He goes, No, they wanted to go fishing." He said, "I went and got a fishing rod and bait." He said, "I was the only one on the river catching anything. They would tell me where to throw my hook, when to move, when to kind of go somewhere else, when to change the bait." And he said, I was the only one catching stuff. He said that went on for about a month. When he ran out, he'd go back up and get more. Then one day he was completely out, and he says, "I need to go back up and get some more." And then the voices said, "Nope, they're waiting for you. You go up there, they're going to kill you. They know you've been stealing their pot. They're waiting on you." And
This sounds incredible, obviously. So this is almost like what I said earlier, that this is almost evidence of a super brain computer or a sophisticated AI system that can tell you what's going to happen or not. And it's also linked to the clear idea, obviously, that we are in a holographic simulation
Yeah.
or dimension here, that everything maybe happened already and we're part of a sophisticated computer game, because otherwise it's looking into the future, the past, the now is happening simultaneously. Huh?
Well, I worked with this guy for probably over 6 months, and I could watch. I had conversations with the voices through him. You know, they would talk to me, I would talk to them. They weren't nice. So it was step by step. Do these things that the voices don't like. And the voices were getting pissed at me for that. So
And so
it,
did
it,
they like become afraid of you, and did they go away because of it, or did they attack him more?
they didn't like me. They attacked him more to start with, to try to get him to quit listening to what I had to say. You know, and it it was like what I did in the prison. I got a group. I couldn't do this in the state hospital because I got in trouble with psychiatry. I just started asking at the state hospital. I started asking these patients, what are the voices telling you? Because none of them were the least bit interested in it. They were all brainwashed to believe these were hallucinations and that was the truth. So I started asking, what are they saying? And they started telling me. And then one of them, the voices got pissed off, and the guy went and told the psychiatrist that I was asking him what the voices were saying. I got called up to that psychiatrist's office, and he said the voices are hallucinations. What you're doing by asking these patients information about them is you're reinforcing their hallucinations and you're making them worse. Now stop it right now, or you're going to pay the repercussions. So I had to really stay below the radar there. But when I went to the prison, I had a group of volunteers, kind of like Anon here, who were as interested in what these voices were as I was. So they gave me access right into their brains as to what was happening, what these things were saying, right there in the session. So it's like what was going on in their heads throughout the whole thing. And what I'd come up with are these different schemes to do the opposite of what these voices were telling them to do. And the voices were getting pissed off. They didn't like that. They were telling them not to come. They were telling them I was crazy, I was stupid, not to show up. And they would get worse. They would give them headaches on the way there. They would attack them on the way there. They'd get very, very nasty.
And did any of the voices ever tell you something of value?
They didn't like me a whole lot. They wouldn't tell me anything. It was usually they were telling the patient to try to break away. Don't listen to him. This is stupid what he's saying. Listen to us. Don't listen to him. He's crazy. That kind of stuff.
But you confronted them, right?
I would tell them, tell them to go stick their head in the toilet or just something like that. But it started getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. The voices can be confronted. They don't like it, but that's one of the ways. That's what you have to do to beat them.
And did you ever, Anon, have anybody, a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist, whatever, confronting your voices?
Oh, absolutely not. They didn't even ask what the voices were saying. And if you think about it, good science would say, hey, maybe we should ask what these voices are saying, because you'd be able to see if there's a pattern to them.
They don't. They're not interested.
But that's what Jerry did. He started to see the pattern that was occurring. And as Jerry mentioned, they will go into their target's head and find some little thing to try and make that person feel guilty or shame them, or sometimes they'll plant thoughts in their head. So I used to go fishing as a kid, and of course to catch trout or sunnies or bass, you have to bait a hook with an earthworm. Well, the voices started attacking me, saying that, what a horrible creature you are. You kill this earthworm to go catch and eat fish. You're disgusting. But they would latch on this one thing and kept going after me for that little thing of, using a hook to catch a worm. And, I had to eat sometimes. That's what you would do. You would catch fish or food. And so I went through a whole series of stages with these entities, and each stage lasts about maybe, a few months at a time. But one time I remember the entities, it's almost like they weren't just attacking me, but they were attacking all of humanity through me. Like I was acting as a defense attorney or an advocate to defend humanity. But they would say things like, look at you humans, you're disgusting looking. You're just flesh and bones and muscles and destined to rot when you die. Your bodies are a joke. And I started arguing with them. I said, well, look, yeah, but we didn't determine the composition of our bodies. I said, God did. How can you attack me and humanity for what we look like in our form when we had no say in its creation? Something else made us. Go take your arguments to God, not to me. And it was weird, because upon me defending myself against that particular attack, they backed off almost right away. It was like they realized my argument was really strong, so they couldn't get me on that. So that attack only lasted about 2 weeks. And I remember that put something in my own normal thought process that, hey, there's something going on here. If I can win that attack, I could probably win some more or defend against them. So that encouraged me. That gave me hope to start defending against these voices and what they were saying.
See, and that's critical. He fought back. Psychiatry is saying your brain is broken. There's nothing you can do. They have to fight back. They can't just take what these voices are saying and listen to it and do what they have to fight back. If they don't realize that these voices are not them and fight back, they're gone. There's nothing. They'll take them over.
Did you ever suggest to yourself, Anon, that these voices might be demons and that you were under attack?
Well, actually, that kind of comes later, where I came to that conclusion based on the vision that I saw. But I was going back. I didn't know what to call them. I was going back and forth on the fence. I don't know if I was going through some sort of judgment process, some sort of spiritual initiation. I just wasn't sure what was going on, but I had to go through it. But oftentimes they would try to get me to kill myself. There were many times that they would do that throughout the whole ordeal. They would even tell me how to do it. They would tell me how to do it.
Suicide rate for schizophrenics is 3 to 5 times that of what it is for the normal population. So they succeed a lot. 50,000 people a year kill themselves in the U.S.
Because they so convince you that your life's meaningless, that it's not worth living, that you're worthless, you're only a burden on your family and society. So just get rid of yourself. And I remember I reached the point where I was actually hooking up pipes to a car exhaust with duct tape. I mean, I got to that point, but higher thoughts stepped in and prevented me from doing that. And I remember they kept telling me to climb a high voltage tension line. Those really tall towers with the high voltage electric lines you see across the country. They kept telling me to climb up one of those and jump into the wire. It's like I think they go for some dramatic effects sometimes. And the voices and thoughts that I had, I said, at times the voices, they were different. They had different inflections. So it felt like it was something different. But again, I'm just thinking, just my mind playing tricks on me. They also try and keep their target from sleeping. Yeah. They don't want the target to get sleep. They will agitate them, keep them up at night.
It's an important thing also about sleep, because it can happen to people that are not schizophrenics, but that can be attacked in their sleep with insomnia or sleep apnea or other things. Can you address whether or not that can be linked to an outside force?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it can, not always, but it can. And they seem to be strongest between about, I'd say, 1 a.m. to maybe 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, that's when they attack the most, between 2 and 3 in the morning.
In what way, for example, if you can give us just an example of that?
Well, what I've seen is they have nightmares and they wake up, and then as soon as they wake up, the voices start in on them again. So they don't want them to sleep because it weakens their resistance. They don't want them to eat, they don't want them to sleep. They want to weaken them so they can't resist.
So Jerry, what is sleep apnea then? Because that's where people don't get enough oxygen, or they don't breathe during intervals or something during the night.
Oh, I think that's a physical problem. I don't think that has anything to do with these entities or.
Yeah, I have mild sleep apnea. It's just your esophagus closes a little bit, so you tend to wake up sometimes. But it's upon that waking up, you're in kind of that transition state. That's when they may go after you. In that, with any type of thing that they can, just a lot more negative attacks, some scary stuff sometimes. Some scary thoughts they'll put into your head.
Or awful nightmares. They insert awful nightmares. They don't want the person to sleep. They want to complete that terror even while the person's sleeping. So there's almost no rest from them when they get really strong. There's nothing. You can't sleep. You can't eat. You can't think. I mean, it's a horrible state.
We hear that a lot from targeted individuals too, talking about going through all of that, being kept up during the night, electromagnetic radiation and sounds and what have you. But do you think that could be linked to schizophrenia?
Yeah, I think so. In a lot of cases, matter of fact, there was one recent case that I had working with a client where they said, oh yeah, I'm targeted. And we got rid of the voices and the targeting, the feeling of being targeted. So what the feeling, the targeted thing is basically they're doing is saying, you're helpless. There's nothing you can do about this. This is coming in from the government and other sources, and you're helpless. So they want the person to feel helpless. They can't do anything about it. And that's exactly what psychiatry is telling these people. There's nothing you can do. Your brain is broken. You got a chemical brain imbalance. You got to take these toxic drugs for the rest of your life, and you got to pay us tons of money to come and get appointments, and those drugs are expensive. They're super expensive. Here in the U.S., it's probably $200 for a psychiatric's appointment, and then $800 a month for these antipsychotic drugs.
Yeah, it's a money-making machine.
Yeah, $14.7 billion a year. And you go across the border into Mexico, and it's the same drugs made by the same company for $75 in one of their pharmacies. But it's illegal to bring them back across the border because the pharmacy, big pharma, has made it illegal. They paid off the government to do it.
Yeah. Are there more male than female schizophrenics, or is it like 50-50?
I don't know. My gut feeling is that there's slightly more males.
You've seen more males, right? Because you were the
That's
criminally
what.
insane and
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, I worked in a male prison,
right.
but when I worked at the state hospital, there were equal numbers, I think. But most of the places I worked, the state prison, it was all males where I worked.
Hmm. So Anon, maybe you want to continue your story and how you recovered, because you say that you recovered in your mid-20s, and judging from your the image we see of you, that's a little while ago.
Quite a while ago, yes. Well, I felt more comfortable now to talk about this stuff just because I'm more established. I'm getting closer to retirement age, so it's not quite a threat to my career or the stigma of having had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. So, as I mentioned, when I got out from the hospital, the ECT, electric convulsive therapy, had made my thoughts a lot calmer. They didn't give me any of the high-end psychiatric drugs to take after I left the hospital. So I was on a low dose of Klonopin, is what they had me on, which is more of a mood stabilizer. But none of the hardcore tranquilizers that I had taken in the hospital was I required to take after I got out. So I was somewhat functional when I got out. So I mentioned that the voices had come back. They were kind of going through all these attacks and continuing at various stages. And I felt like it was like going through a hierarchy. Like the voices had different inflections, different levels of intelligence. One stage they started telling me how humanity did not deserve to exist, that you human beings are just about violence all the time. And they actually started showing scenes of wars and battles and human violence in my head. It was almost like seeing a cinematography going across, like I was watching a movie of all the atrocities that humanity has done through the years. And they would say, see, humanity is an abomination. They don't deserve to exist. You're a terrible species. And I kept defending these attacks. I would say, yes, some humans are bad and awful and full of hate. But I said, some are full of love and generosity and compassion. And I said, you don't condemn an entire species based on the actions of a few. So as I mentioned, throughout this ordeal, it was almost like I was at times being an advocate or a defense attorney for all of humanity, the way these voices were behaving, because they weren't just attacking me, they seemed to be attacking all of humanity through me. So it was almost like an Armageddon going on in my head or something of that nature. So I went through a whole series of these different attacks where they would say different things. Oh, they would constantly say, oh yeah, don't tell anybody about us. They'll never believe you. If you tell anybody about what you're going through, they'll just lock you up and throw away the key.
Yeah, they hate other people to know. They don't want anybody to know what they're telling people. And they punish them if they tell other people what they're saying.
So I went through a whole series of stages. I don't have time to go into all the details of what those were, but I remember the final one. I was at rock bottom. I mean, here I was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, dealing with these voices in my head, attacking. I'm unemployed, trying to get on with my life, feeling like a total loser. Even though I had a college degree in mechanical engineering, but these voices just make you feel like you're nothing, that you're unaccomplished, that you're stupid, you're an idiot.
Were you able to sustain a relationship, either with a partner or with friends or something at that point?
No, I wasn't in a relationship at the time, but I remember some of my good friends coming over trying to get me out of the house because the entities kept wanting you to isolate because they wanted their undivided attention. And I admit, one of my friends got me out to play basketball for a little while, and I started to feel better just being out for an hour or two. But that's what the voices, they make it like you're not, they don't want you outside, or they don't want you interacting with your friends or other people. So
that's right. That goes for all of them. They don't want any interference with their trying to take somebody over. The parents, mothers, and fathers of schizophrenic kids are automatic enemies of the voices.
Now, as far as I was assigned a counselor who was to give like talk therapy after I got out of the hospital, and I also had a psychiatrist who was prescribing the drugs for me. With the Klonopin at the time is what I was on. But I wasn't telling my counselor about everything that was going on in my head because, first of all, I didn't want them putting me on more intense drugs or tranquilizers because I felt this was a spiritual battle and I had to face it head on. So really with the counselor, I was just talking about codependency issues that I had with my mother at the time. I didn't go into anything else that was going on because that's the only thing I wanted to focus on. The other stuff I felt like I had to deal with. So I was at rock bottom. This is approaching fall of 1991. This is about a year since I was discharged from the psychiatric hospital. And then the voices it was very intense, strong ones saying, God does not exist. Give it up. Your faith is ridiculous. There's no such thing as God.
Why would a hallucination do that?
There's nothing beyond your material body. You're just molecules and chemistry and proteins and fat. You have nothing beyond that. So it was trying to take away any sense of faith that I had within me. And I admit, I was starting to lose my faith that there was something beyond what I was going through. I'm still on the fence that this is just my mind playing tricks on me, or if there's something coming in from the outside.
But if you do believe in God and you have faith in certain religion, whatever, why would God allow this to happen to you and allow these demons to interfere and possess you?
That's an existential question that I cannot answer, but I will tell you what did occur. So I started praying to God, or the highest essence of what I thought God should be. I said, God, give me a sign. I need to know that this is a true spiritual battle that I'm undergoing, not just pure mental illness. Because I can't go on anymore. I'm at rock bottom. I'm starting to lose faith in you, God. I need to know that you are there. I said, I need to have a sign from you. If you give me a sign, I can keep going with these internal battles. But if not, I'm done. I mean, I was ready to commit suicide at this point. I was at rock bottom. These voices are continuing on. I can't get on with my life. And now these voices are telling me that there is no God, that there is no soul, that you have nothing beyond. You're just earth. You're just matter. And I didn't want to go on living if that was the case. So I prayed the most intense praying I ever did. I mean, I was almost curled up in a fetal position sometimes doing these prayers. This went on for about 2 weeks. I didn't say what the sign was to be because I didn't want to insert any bias into what I was asking for. I didn't want any preconceived notions of what the sign should be. So if the sign was, say, a priest knocking at my door, I would have accepted that. If a Bible or some sort of model of a manger arrived in the mail by mistake, I would have accepted that. If I saw a rabbi walking down the main street of my small town, I would have accepted that. What occurred is I had a vision, and it saved my life. So I mentioned I was praying so intensely for 2 weeks to God to give me a sign that this is more than just mental illness going on in my head, that there's a spiritual aspect to this. I need to know that you're there, or else I can't go on with this anymore. So after about 2 weeks of the most intense praying, I had a visual hallucination, and I can show your viewing audience what exactly it is that I saw. So I'm going to share this presentation with you. I'll do it this way. So can you see a line drawing of like a room?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure what point I got cut off, so I'll just start from the beginning. So I mentioned that I was praying to God to give me a sign. I woke up one morning about 2 o'clock in the morning with the feeling there was a presence in my room, very strong, very powerful. I looked around. I couldn't see anything. So I'm lying on my back, just staring at the square light fixture above my head on the ceiling, saying, what is in my room? I don't know, a burglar caught him, but just, it was almost like it was connected to me and I could feel it. The next thing I know, I start to see like this fog or mist or smoke-like substance starts pouring in from near the ceiling to the left-hand side of the square light fixture. Are you seeing the smoke come in the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay. At first I'm thinking, oh, great. There's an electrical fire occurring in the light fixture. But then I realized this isn't coming in from where the wires going to the light fixture. And it wasn't moving like smoke. It was moving almost the way food coloring would move through a glass of water if you dropped it in. but it was almost like a grayish, silverish, blackish fog, smoke, or mist is the best way of describing it. And it wasn't occurring at the ceiling. It was occurring in a plane about 6 inches to a foot below the ceiling. And I'm thinking, what is going on here? And then it dawned on me. My schizophrenia is getting worse. Now I'm just going to have a visual hallucination. I'm like, oh, great. This is because of the schizophrenia. This is probably what's happening. So part of me was kind of upset, thinking, oh, great, my condition's getting worse. I'm never going to get it off my life. I'm going to have this the rest of my life, this stuff occurring. The other part of me was curious. The scientist in me was like, okay, well, let's see where this hallucination goes. Let's see what my schizophrenic brain is going to tell me. So more and more of the smoke is coming in, and I noticed a portal starting to open up in the middle of this cloud that was forming. The portal's getting bigger and bigger, and I'm feeling all sorts of emotions. I'm scared because this isn't normal reality, but I'm very curious too because the scientist inside me, the observer, wants to see what's going on here. So the portal's getting bigger and bigger. And I noticed that you could actually see the smoke or cloud or fog coming in from the inside periphery of this portal. And it was vertical and oblong, like oval shaped. The room is filling up. And all of a sudden, I see these two serpentine-like tails move from bottom to top in the portal. I could see the scales on them and everything. It was very black in the portal. I couldn't see much beyond that. But I distinctly remember seeing these two snake-like tails moving almost in parallel in the portal from bottom to top. I'm lying on my back just watching this. And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? And part of me is saying, well, thank goodness, whatever that is, it's not in my room. But I spoke too soon on that in my own head. And the fog filled up to the point where I really couldn't see the portal anymore, but it was very thick. It was almost like a free-floating, freestanding cloud within the room. And then I started to see serpentine movements within the cloud itself. And I could see the serpentine movements, like it would come in and out of the cloud at the very fringes and the edge. And I could see that something was stirring in that cloud. I'm like, what is going on here? And now I'm starting a little scared because I'm thinking that this snake-like entity is going to come out and do something in the room. So I'm watching it, and for a while, I could see turbulent flow. Like I could see the fringes of the cloud, like something was stirring inside. I could see movements. And then all of a sudden, this head pops out of the cloud at about a 2 o'clock position. And I was expecting this creature or entity, or whatever it was, this hallucination, I was expecting to have like a reptilian head on it, but it didn't. It had a mammalian head. This thing had a mane. It looked like an ape, dog, or lion-like from the side. I could see whiskers. And I could see a seam running down the side of it. Almost like it could had two tails, but it could act as one member the way it moved. So the vertebrae looked snake-like, but it wasn't quite a snake. But there's definitely black scales on the side, and the scales underneath were grayish in color. But I remember I could see the seam running down the side. And the items on the right here, these are images that I came across probably in the last 4 or 5 years. I didn't know what this entity was when it popped out, but there's ancient literature about this entity. The ancient Egyptians referred to it as Chinubis. And here in the lower right-hand corner is actually a talisman, a Gnostic solar icon. This is from the 3rd or 4th century that shows the same entity that I saw. Now, I've discovered, I didn't know about Gnosticism until about 2020, but they talked about this entity, and they refer to it as Yaldabaoth, Abraxas, Daclus, Samuel. It goes by a few different names, but it's basically the so-called evil god of the Old Testament is another thing it's referred to. It goes under several different names, and different philosophies talk about this entity. It's sometimes referred to as the demiurge, or demiurgos in Greek, the maker of the material world. So at the time this occurred, I didn't know what this was referred to. So I had no knowledge of Gnosticism. I grew up with an Orthodox Greek and Methodist and Catholic background, so I didn't know anything about Gnosticism, but yet the Gnostics talk about this entity. So it comes into my room and then faces me head on. I wasn't that scared at first. It was more like curiosity, like, okay, why is my brain doing this? Why is it coming out with some hybrid creature that's part lion-like, part snake-like? I was expecting to see all these other hybrid creatures coming out of the cloud too, like, a hippopotamus on a duck's body, or a cat on a lizard's body, because I'm just thinking this is my mind playing tricks on me, being the so-called schizophrenic. So the entity faces me head on. It definitely looked like some sort of feline creature from the looking face on. I could see whiskers, stubble. It definitely had a mane. It was mangy looking. It looked like its left eye was either scratched out, or it might have even been blind in its left eye. It looked like it'd been in a few cat fights. So the creature's facing me, and I'm just lying on my back, staring up at this thing, watching this hallucination or vision, or this entity could actually have materialized and be in my room right now. Next thing I know, it comes at me, and its face changes to the most horrible thing you could think of. It looked like a old man or old hag of decay. It probably looked lizard-like, but I remember its skin became all wrinkled and prune-like. It was just horrible to look at. And it opened its mouth almost like with a howling, screaming expression. And I remember every cell in my body had goosebumps. I mean, and this is all occurring over a fraction of maybe a few seconds, but I just remember I had goosebumps all over my body. I was in such a state of fright and fear at this point, because this isn't normal reality. This stuff should be happening. They don't teach you this stuff in school. And I remember thinking this is going to be the end of my existence. I felt like this creature was coming to destroy me, or to somehow take my soul away. I thought I was going to die. I felt like fighting it would have been pointless, because I remember I could sense this entity before I even saw the portal open up. And now there's things in my room coming after me. So rather than fight it, I lowered my ego, and I just projected love onto it. I felt like, okay, you're not this realm. I'm a mere mortal. I don't have the power to fight you. I'm going to just give you love. And I think it was part of that reason, I think, was I didn't want to give it the satisfaction of having me die in a state of fright. I don't know if that was my own thought to project love onto it. I don't know if that, or it could have come from a higher thought, something benevolent trying to help me. But I just remember I just projected love onto it. I almost feel a whole aura of love come off my body and confront whatever projection. And this creature, it felt evil at this point in time, because I was in such a state of extreme fright. Next thing I know, the entity seemed to disappear or pulverize or vanish. I mean, it came at me, and when I projected love onto it, it disappeared. And I'm lying on my back thinking, am I dead or am I alive? Am I still here? And as I'm gathering my bearings, a different entity appeared. Now, I'm not an artist, so I do this kind of like a white mask face, but this entity had the most beautiful face I could ever imagine. It was so beautiful that I felt it viscerally, if I'm saying that word correctly. It seemed to have, it had pairs of wings. It could have been 3 or 4 pairs. At least that's the way my mind was interpreting them. But they actually looked like radiant discharges of like golden bronze's energy, almost like the way a solar flare would look. But my mind could easily interpret it as wings as well. And the wings would move around. Like sometimes it'd be over its eyes, sometimes it wouldn't. But the face was rather androgynous looking, but I felt like it was of a feminine nature. And I remember its eyes were closed relative to its hovering position. It's almost like it wasn't aware of my presence yet, or it wasn't aware of where it was. And I didn't know what was going to happen next. I'm thinking this previous entity came out and turned into something very frightening and came at me. The second entity was it was a humanoid face, but it was such sheer beauty, undescribable beauty. It was so beautiful. I remember part of me was ready to leave the room. Like I felt like as a mere mortal, I wasn't worthy to even look at this face. But I felt like it wasn't aware that I was there. And this is just some other images I came across years later that could possibly kind of describe a little bit what this face looked like. On the lower left-hand corner here, we have something referred to as a cherub, a seraph, or an aeon. Notice a multiple pair of wings and the single beautiful face. Now, I didn't know any of this stuff until years later when I started researching. So I'm lying on my back, just staring at this entity, waiting to see what was going to happen next. It felt like an eternity. I almost felt like this entity was going to turn something very horrible and come at me like the previous entity had done. I mean, after all, I was a diagnosed schizophrenic. Next thing I know, this entity opens its eyes. Now, I drew the entity this way. It might have had pupils, but I remember it had very dark pupils. But it was undescribable beauty. It was almost beauty that a mortal could not even describe based on what I was seeing. And then we just stared at each other for a while. And I remember the wings were moving back and forth. The cloud is dissipating that was there, but I could still see the portal behind it. So we're just staring. I'm lying on my back in my bed looking at this entity. It's staring back at me. I didn't know what was going to happen next. It's like it was trying to decide what to do, or it might have been judging me. It almost seemed like something that had been in prison for quite a long time, and suddenly its shackles had been released. But this went on for several minutes where we're just looking at each other. And I always felt like time was in a flux, though, too, because there was stuff going on behind this entity, but I really couldn't focus on that because I was so focused on the face and what was happening here. And all of a sudden, the entity smiles at me. And it was the most beautiful smile I ever saw. I could even see dimples forming in it because it had a humanoid face to it. And when it smiled, I was just felt this wave. I was blasted with this wave of love, ecstasy, bliss. It was like it was telling me everything was going to be fine, and that I was past the worst of my crisis, whatever it is that I was going through. So I then felt myself having kind of an out-of-body experience. I started to rise up out. I felt like I was rising out of my body, and I was merging with this entity. It's like we were becoming one being. And as I'm rising out of my body, having this out-of-body experience, merging with this entity, the entity is starting to move kind of backwards towards the ceiling, going towards the portal. And just as I'm about to 100% merge with this entity, and we're both about to go through the portal together as kind of almost as one being, I'm in a state of sheer bliss. I mean, it was erotic too, not in the physical sense, but erotic in a higher sense of having merged with this other entity, and we're sharing each other's thoughts, feelings, emotions. And just as I'm about to enter the portal, I went out. In other words, something deliberately put me back to sleep, or I went back to sleep. It's almost like when you're about to be given anesthesia, you kind of know when you go out. But everything went gray, then black. Now, I woke up that morning about 3 or 4 hours later, about 7 or 8 o'clock. I was in a state of religious shock. It's like, what just happened? There was no physical evidence in my room that I could find that this had even occurred. But I knew something had changed in me. I was praying to God to give me a sign, and then have an encounter like this. It gave me the proof that I needed to conclude that these voices were coming from outside of me, that these entities, they gave themselves away. Now, the Gnostics would refer to that entity as distinct, like serpentine entity, as being Yaldabaoth, Abraxas. It goes by several different names depending on which source you're looking at. Another entity could have been what they refer to as Sophia. or an Aon. And again, the words Yaldabaoth, Sophia, Aeons, Archons, that wasn't even in my vocabulary back when this was happening. I just learned about Gnosticism probably about in 2020 as I started doing more research on this. I mean, so after I had this experience, I was trying to put it behind me. I didn't tell my counselor about it because I just felt like she was going to put me on more intense drugs, and I didn't want to be on any drugs. I was trying to get off of the Klonopin. I wanted to get my mental faculties back. I wanted to get on with my life. But this experience, the vision that I had, it gave me the will to live, because it basically it gave me the proof that I needed, that I was truly facing a spiritual battle. Now, whether the second entity, the beautiful one, was evil as well, some people could refer to it as a Luciferian entity. I mean, there's all different ways to describe or come up with what these things actually are. I'm not going to say I absolutely know. I can only put forth conjectures. This is the experience that I went through. There's multiple ways of interpreting it. Everybody gives you all different interpretations. Oh, both entities were evil. One was good, one was evil. Oh, they're the same entity. It changed shape or form and you projected love on it. I've heard all different things. But this is the vision that I had. And part of me was like, oh, great, my schizophrenia is getting worse. I expect to have a lot more of these occurring. But I never had another vision like that again. And it gave me the strength and the courage to start standing up to the voices and the negative thoughts in my head. So I'd say the negative thoughts probably diminished within about maybe 18 to 24 months after this vision, because I had a lot more strength to fight against them. I had made the internal conclusion that this truly was a spiritual battle, and that these voices and negative thoughts were coming from an outside source. It wasn't my own thoughts. I was probably off the medications probably in about 18 to 24 months as well. So by my late 20s, I was pretty much past the schizophrenia, and I was getting on with my life. And I put this behind me for so many years. And it was kind of the writing of the book that you mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that led me to Gnosticism, to realize what I went through. Something happened. I don't know if that was a cosmic event just for my own sake, or if that was a cosmic event that affected all of humanity, the human timeline, but something changed, something shifted. And it goes to show that there's definitely some truth within the Bible and all the scriptural texts out there, be it both the Eastern religions, the Western religions. And if you're familiar with the Nag Hammadi library that was discovered in 1945, that goes into all these things. And if I may, I'm going to read you a section from the Nag Hammadi library. This is actually from the Apocryphon of John. And this was written in the 2nd century, probably prior to 185 of the Common Era. But it talks of a lion-faced serpent that resulted from an Aeon Sophia's error. And this is a direct quote from that scripture from about the 2nd century. And when she saw the consequences of her desire, it changed into a form of a lion-faced serpent, and its eyes were like lightning fires which flash. She cast it away from her, outside that place, that no one of the immortal ones might see it, for she had created it in ignorance. And she surrounded it with a luminous cloud, and she placed the throne in the middle of the cloud, that no one might see it except the Holy Spirit, who is called the Mother of the Living. And she called his name Yaldabaoth. And here's another section. But Yaldabaoth had a multitude of faces, more than all of them, so that he could put a face before all of them, according to his desire, when he was in the midst of the seraphs. He shared his fire with them. Therefore he became Lord over them. Because of the power of the glory he possessed of his mother's light, he called himself God, and did not obey the place from which he came. So what this text is saying is basically this entity can morph its face and its appearance. So here it is. I saw something that the ancient Gnostics talked about, and I had no idea what it was at the time. You know, it wasn't until 2020, but I even learned Gnosticism and what these entities are. So it's a busy universe out there. There's stuff going on beyond the veil that we can't see. And that portal, that was a glitch in the matrix. That was showing that we are in some sort of simulation. The fact that space-time opened up in my room. And, you know, who am I to have such an experience? Keep in mind, these entities are telling me how worthless I am. And then I had such a divine encounter. but that experience, it gave me the will to keep on going with life. And like, I live a pretty normal existence, but I have to dwell within the material world. But at the same time, I know I went through these experiences. I know there's something more out there than meets the eye. Souls are real. There's something going on beyond the veil. And I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what it is, but knowing something is going on is enough to definitely excite our curiosity and realize there's more to us than meets the eye.
This sounds really amazing and very fascinating, and such an incredible experience and story you had there, and it was nice to see the presentation. So would you say that after that happened and after you had this experience, then the voices were gone, they never came back, and you were cured from your schizophrenia?
I would say the voices still continued, but I was able to stand up to them so much more. It's almost like they continued a little bit after, but they were losing, and they started to diminish over time, over a period of months after that. And I was also standing up to them now so much more because I came to the conclusion these weren't my own thoughts. This was coming from something from the outside. So I was able to stand up to them more and just say, "You're lying again. You're gaslighting. You're making stuff up. Go away."
And they're consummate liars.
Yeah, I would laugh at them sometimes. It would get them pissed off, but they were losing hold of me as a food source or a drug source. They weren't able to get the Loosh off me the way they were before, so they went away.
So they totally disappeared and did not come back eventually.
Correct. So I mean, there's been occasions in more recent where once I had a very intense voice, but since about 1992 or 93, pretty much they've been gone for the most part. There's sometimes when I read the Nakamani Library for the first time in about 2020, one of the voices did come back and said something. It was rather interesting, but that's another story. But for the most part, I was pretty much.
You're sort of making it a little interesting. Is that what did that voice say that came back in 2020?
Well, actually, I was reading the Nakamani for the very first time, and I was reading it at night. I was about to fall asleep, and also a very strong voice. It either said "ha ha" like a laugh, like it made like a laugh, like "ha ha," like that. Now I don't know if it was toying with me. I don't know if it was. Can you give me a hint? But it was such a strong voice, man. I jumped out of bed. It was such a strong voice, and I took the dog out for a walk. I came back about 20 minutes later, and I continued reading the section that I was in, and then that section said that I'd have to pull the exact quote, but it's something that she laughs because of the loss of her consort, and he laughs because of this. But it was talking about laughter of Sophia and Yaldabal. And you call it a synchronicity too, but it's just so weird that I heard that voice saying "ha ha," and then about 20, 30 minutes later, I read a section in the Nakamani Library that talks about laughter and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So if that would ever occur today, or if you would hear somebody speak or a voice enter your head, would you then call Jerry?
No.
No.
You don't need to do that.
The thing is, now that I hear the voices, or if I do hear a voice, I don't feel fear or anxiety or aggression with it. I kind of treat it as, oh, neat. It's another spiritual experience. You got something to say? Tell me.
So you don't fear it now. You don't have a problem with it. It's not taking over you in one way or the other.
Correct. It's not keeping me from living my human experience and having a human existence.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like they've lost power over me too because of some of the spiritual work that I've done on myself over the years. And just the fact that they, with that vision or hallucination or those entities truly materialized in my room, they gave themselves away.
So you cannot really say that you're 100% cured because there is a chance that they might come back in one way or the other in some form momentarily.
They might come back as an intrusive thought, but he knows what they are now.
Nothing to the tense where they totally dominate my thoughts, where I can't think, where I can't function. I mean, I work as a mechanical engineer. I'm doing intense algorithms and stuff all day long. So, I mean, if they're at that point, I wouldn't even be able to do my job anymore. And I've been working for since my late 20s, early 30s very easily. And keep in mind, everybody hears thoughts every now and then. So I don't know if that ha-ha was coming from negative entities, or it could have been coming from positive entities too. I don't know. Just saying that, hey, you're on the right track, the synchronicity. But the ha-ha didn't cause any harm in what I was doing. And it could also have been a playful laugh, not necessarily something that was negative. Sometimes it's up to our interpretation. We don't always interpret things correctly.
Very interesting. So, Jerry, who was the first doctor or scientist or institution who clinically or otherwise diagnosed schizophrenia or that mental state?
Well, it started out with they call it split mind or split brain, so that's what it started out as. But schizophrenia has been around ever since Jesus' time. Jesus, with the 23 times in the Bible, he was casting these things out of people, So it's real strange that a Christian society, supposedly we are today, don't deal with these things. They go, oh yeah, we'll talk about Christ. Well, it's not Christ that's causing the problems. It's these things, and they're not addressing it. I've known heard of preachers where somebody with the voices went to them and they were scared of the guy. They didn't want to deal with him. They'd send him to a psychiatrist who'd drug him. So they're there. I mean, and mental illness is increasing. It's getting worse. And these drugs that the psychiatric mafia are dishing out are not getting at the cause of anything. They're just dumping drugs on your brain, treating the symptoms. They're not getting at the cause. The cause are these entities. And I've heard, I think, from two other people that described the same kind of ink type thing that, when the voices appeared, it was like ink being dumped into water. It looked just like Anon was describing. So it's not just him saying that. There's two or three others that have seen the same thing.
So going back, I found the section that I was reading. It was in a Valentinian exposition in the Nag Hammadi library. So this is the actual quote that I read after hearing that voice saying, ha ha. So they both suffered. They said she laughed since she remained alone and imitated the uncontainable one. Well, he said she laughed since she cut herself off from her consort. So the question was that just a coincidence, or was that a synchronicity occurring there? And so going back to what Jerry's saying about the Bible and Jesus, there's definitely something going on. I mean, at times I could put forth so many different conjectures of what occurred. I mean, I could say that the Christ conscious actually entered me to help me out with my battle, to deal with what I was dealing with. That could be one way of interpreting it. I mean, there's so many different ways that one can interpret things. But definitely looking back, it was an experience both divinity and the devil, I would say.
Maybe you were quite lucky compared to a lot of people. So, but you were just saying, Jerry, that there's an increasing number of mental health problems now. But could that increasing number of mental health patients worldwide have something to do with this century-long deliberate attack on the pineal gland and its true powerful and spiritual potential to suppress original human and psychic abilities, along with food poisoning, chemicals, fluoride, chemtrails, electromagnetic radiation, and so on?
Yeah, I think so. They're trying to poison us. They're feeding off us. They hate us. They hate the human race.
I mean, there's a spiritual battle going on. There definitely is. And the way to win this
could the pineal gland have something to do with it? I mean, you were talking about the days of Jesus and all that, but we don't really know if that was schizophrenia or anything at that time. But I mean, way back in the past, they talk about, the pineal gland being not calcified, and we were able to use our psychic abilities to move objects, maybe the pyramids, maybe that we had help from outside ETs or whatever, but maybe we could also move objects. They talk about that also in the ancient scriptures and all that. So, and we have this incredible human potential through the pineal gland, and it's completely under attack. But could that deliberate attack have something to do with an increasing number of not just schizophrenics, but mental health patients in general?
Well, it might, but I think it's got more to do with Loosh. They want to feed on that negative emotional energy. That's their food. So they're doing to us what we do to cows. They put the cow out in the field, he eats grass, he makes milk, they bring him in, isolate him, and milk him. They're doing the same thing to us, the ones
And
that
they can
they
do
can.
that through dumbing us down, right? Through
Yes.
calcifying our pineal gland so that we
Yep.
can't see beyond the veil, so that we
Right.
can't use our abilities, so that we are not in the know about anything. We have to rediscover who we are and everything, we just don't
Right.
see clearly.
Yep. They want to keep us trapped here.
So
They
what,
want to keep.
Jerry, is your opinion on sound healing? Could that potentially, and sound frequencies, do you think, because a lot of people are talking about that now, we do know that that can, if not cure, certainly heal a lot of trauma and also physical illnesses in the body when used correctly. And do you think that could also be used on mental health patients? We have an example here from the largest hospital here in Copenhagen, Denmark. They're researching and now using sound frequencies in their treatment, like a tuning fork, to treat some people of neurological damage that they had from a car accident or something else. So, I mean, they are kind of opening up a little bit to that. But I mean, certainly that may be also an instrument or a tool to use against or for to treat mental illnesses.
Yeah. There's certain frequencies they don't like. Um, Matter of fact, I had a. This is one of them right here. If I can get it to ring. Hmm, there it is.
We don't hear it. Maybe you should put it close to the microphone.
Did you
No,
hear
it's
it?
like it's blocked out. It's only your sound. We only hear the voice. We just don't hear the sound. But that is a tuning fork.
Yeah, they don't like that sound either. So, sound is energy. These things are energy. They're energetic beings. That's how they can enter your mind. We're energetic beings. Our thoughts are energy. Our memories energy. Our spirit is energy. We're energetic beings, and friggin' psychiatry is treating us like all there is physical. We're just physical beings. So they just dump drugs on your brain and turn you into a zombie. They're not curing anything. They're just treating symptoms. And they're making a lot of money doing it, and they're causing a lot of damage doing it. These antidepressants have suicide ideation warnings on there. May cause suicidal ideation. And you look at the 50,000 people that kill themselves in the United States every year. A good many of them are on these antipsychotic and antidepressant drugs. They're not curing anything. They're not getting at the cause of the problem.
So is it?
Mhm.
So are there more people that took mind expanding drugs like LSD and whatever we talked about, different meth, what you know all of these drugs there, that actually became schizophrenics because of that, because they opened that portal? I think we talked a little bit about that before. Or is it just could it just be anybody who didn't take
No,
anything and that happened too?
well,
But
that could happen too, but it does happen with the heavy duty. It's not very frequent, but it does happen. But a big one that you might not suspect are Ouija boards. There are a lot of people go psychotic on Ouija boards, and I was talking to one. They said, they were pushing this thing around, and it was talking to them, and then eventually it started appearing in their mind. They didn't have to talk to it anymore; it was in their mind. From then on, they were schizophrenic.
well,
Same
you
thing
can
with,
summon demons through those Ouija boards, right? We've
yeah,
heard and seen that,
they're they're
even
they're
seen
not
it on
toys.
TV.
Yeah, they're not toys. They ought to outlaw those things. You
Mhm.
don't know what you're playing with. I mean, they may come down and start talking to you, and one of their big deceptions is to try to make you, oh, we can help you out. We're your spiritual friends. We can do this for you. We can do that for you. And once they got you hooked, they got you.
I mean, that's even in
Once
the
you,
Bible that you have to test the spirits. Make sure you know what
yeah.
you're dealing with.
What about sort of other, I mean, some not natural mind expanding drugs, mushrooms and stuff? We've heard that some of that can actually be used to cure certain mental illnesses or used for that. I don't know how to really, I don't know the details of that. I don't know if you know
Well,
anything
yeah,
about that,
I do.
Jerry.
Psilocybin will shut down the internal dialogue. I mean, your mind will go silent. You're aware that that's what you are. You're awareness. And psilocybin will shut down that internal dialogue, which is why they outlaw it. They don't want anybody to have that stuff. It's a Schedule I drug here in the U.S. You know, that what they want is they want marijuana that will dumb you down and make you stupid. You know, they'll
So
let you,
marijuana will do that, cannabis?
yeah, it'll dumb you down, make you stupid. I mean, it just, you have these people who are smoking for years and they're just kind of like, they're kind of gorked out. You know,
But a
it,
lot of people use it for pain,
yeah,
because nothing else works, and it's very important to use it for pain. And also, a lot of people, instead of taking Ritalin, as we were talking about before, that you claim can cause schizophrenia, they also smoke cannabis if they have ADHD and some of these things to sort of calm the mind, right?
it'll calm them down, but it also dumbs you down.
So it's not a good thing.
Well, it's relaxing,
So
you
is it
know.
Yeah.
better or worse to smoke some cannabis occasionally than to drink alcohol?
Well, alcohol has its own set of spirits associated with it. That's why they call it spirits, and there's a number of patients I've talked to where, they when they get drunk to a certain point, these spirits jump in there and they take over the drinking. So they're they're wandering around on this sphere. They can't get drunk in a spiritual form, but they can jump into somebody and get them to drink more. So a lot of alcoholics don't realize that they're not the only ones drinking. These things jump in there. They want their share too. They're getting high at the same time. And I've seen several people said that they actually saw that happen.
Wow.
If I may throw my opinion in here, I mean, I don't do drugs. I don't do recreational drugs. I'm sure I did some in college, but I try to stay away from that sort of thing. But again, I'm not necessarily against it. I've seen cases with shrooms helping people. I've seen cases with some cannabis helping people, but it has to be in moderation. It's the
Yeah,
excessive use of it, I think, that causes the big problems. And I mean, stress seems to cause more damage to the brain than a little cannabis every now and then. And it's a case by case basis. Some people it's helpful. Some people it opens up doorways, or maybe they're not at the right level as far as in their emotional, spiritual development to handle some of this stuff. I don't think we should all be going out there and doing this stuff left and right. But I think some of these psychedelic drugs they have their place in society. We're just not
yeah,
sure where it should be, and it shouldn't be done excessively. It should be
right.
done with proper controls, like having a good legitimate shaman who knows what they're doing. Let's say if you're doing ayahuasca, to have somebody there who knows what they're doing, not some
Yeah,
weekend retreat type of thing.
yeah. And I've heard of a number of patients who were already on the brink. They were already very unstable that smoked marijuana and that pushed them over. You know, from that point on, they became psychotic, but they were already on the ropes prior to the use of marijuana.
Yes, and that's important to say that as well. But also, I have an interesting case I want to ask you about, both of you, if you know that. But certainly, Jerry, you've been working with so many people. There's a case of a schizophrenic person who were suddenly able to gain an incredible ability or a talent for something that that person had no talent for well before that, and that was suddenly that this woman became a very skilled piano player and had never been sitting behind a piano before, and suddenly she could play all of these things. And how could that possibly have happened if I mean that sort of suggests
Well,
an entity possession, maybe a good
well,
one,
that
but
that that's a case for reincarnation. That person was probably a piano player in another life.
and then that they could utilize that ability suddenly,
Yeah.
triggering through the schizophrenic experience.
Well, I don't know whether she's schizophrenic, but Mozart, I mean, this guy was playing the piano upside down at age, I don't know, what, 7 or something like that. It's nothing that he could have learned in that lifetime. In the short period of time he was before he was started doing stuff like
You know,
that.
that's Mozart you talk about, right?
Yeah, Mozart. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, but this woman was a schizophrenic, apparently, and then suddenly she acquired these skills that she, under no circumstances, had the talent for, well, before she became a schizophrenic. So that was just interesting. I was just wondering if you had heard about this before.
No, I've never heard of anything like that before. Now they will tell them, where to get drugs. They'll. It's usually bad stuff that contributes to their demise.
I would like to ask both of you if you have something important that you want to share with the audience. So please
Well,
do
actually,
share that because I feel that there's a lot of important stuff for people to hear.
Jerry, if I may, just hey, if you're schizophrenic or you're dealing with a family member or a relative with schizophrenia, just realize it is not a life sentence. But the first thing that the patient or the target has to do is to realize that those are not your thoughts, that those
Right.
voices and thoughts are coming from the outside. Once
I
they
fully
have that
agree.
separation, that's the beginning of healing. I mean, I'm proof. I mean, I haven't been on any psychotropic drugs for schizophrenia since like 1992 or 1993. But that's proof that you can heal. It's a spiritual battle. It takes work. It takes reconditioning how the mind thinks. There's different therapies out there. Jerry has a few that he recommends and works with. I just want to stress that schizophrenia, the objective is to get off the medications, not to stay on them. The objective is to heal your mind, heal your soul, heal your spirit, get off the medications eventually in a controlled, good environment, and to live a normal, healthy, productive life.
Yeah, and there's a group of us MACE practitioners who have been working with schizophrenics, and I'd say we're probably getting a 30 to 40% cure rate. Where the voices are gone by the time. That's not a great number, but even if the voices don't leave, the garbage that they feed off of, we can get rid of. So they weaken. Um, and
So there
no.
is hope for
There is,
people
yeah,
that,
oh yeah, don't listen to psychiatry saying this is a, death sentence. You got to take these drugs for the rest of your life. Those people have lied to the world over and over and over again for their own profit. Like I said, they're making $14.7 billion a year selling these toxic antipsychotic drugs that don't cure anything. They just tamp down symptoms. Not to say that there's some people that don't need them. I mean, I've seen people in the prison that were so violent that, that's the only way you could control those guys. And there's some people that are psychotic that are so violent. That's the only way you can control them. I mean, they have their place, but it's not with the average everyday person. I mean, it should be a temporary thing, uh, to help them out like a crutch and not oh, there is no hope. The only thing you can do is take these toxic drugs for the rest of your life. That's bull crap.
but can you even judge for yourself if you are in that state of mind, whether or not you should have those drugs? If you have these schizophrenic episodes, and maybe you don't even have the choice if you're being put into a mental institution.
Yeah. Yeah, I have one person that comes on with me who did not have that choice and was put into a mental institution because he went crazy on meth. And then he sobered up in the mental institution and he was perfectly sane and he was trapped in there. He could not get out.
Yeah, that's a terrible thing. So in our last moments here, Jerry, would you please mention you've written a book or more and also your website. If people want to contact you for advice or consultations or whatever, or to have you on their shows, please mention that to people.
Yeah, you can reach me at jerrymarzinsky.com. And Sherry and I wrote this book. So Sherry was schizophrenic when she was young, kind of like Anon. And it was 10 years that I was dealing with her with prison reform before she told me that she was hearing voices. And yeah, I didn't believe it because there is a stigma with this. So I have to hand it to Anon because it takes courage to get out there and say, listen, this is what's really going on in the face of this overwhelming psychiatric mafia that would accuse both of us as being nutcases. They do not
Yeah.
want this information out there.
Definitely,
Yeah,
very important. And also about your book. people should watch our first episode because we go into a lot of things and also about the topics of your book and your past history working with all of these people for so many years. So Anon, you also have a book, Revelations on Interstellar Highway 10, recovered schizophrenic in his mid-20s. Please just address that, how people can get your book or anything, any information you want to share.
Certainly. Here's my book. It's kind of a manifesto. It was written over a period of 30 years. It really doesn't go into schizophrenia, but it's more of a spiritual exploration, trying to find meaning in life. And this is what led me to discover Gnosticism, and this is kind of what led me to Jerry Marsinsky. So it's a path. But it takes the approach that there's multiple paths to the Godhead. There's multiple religions out there, and it's that how we have to put forth as human beings some of the better aspects of our personalities. Being more kind, more compassionate, putting forth healthy love, tolerance. I mean, all those positive energies, because there's a lot of hatred and anger in the world, and it's not doing us any good. And I feel like these entities are the ones really trying to generate this stuff.
Yeah, they are. And I got a couple of pictures here drawn by schizophrenics I want to show you. This one was a transgender murder. So this guy killed a bunch of people. And this is a picture he drew of himself looking in the mirror. I don't know if you can see this or not.
Go back a little bit because it's blurry. I don't know if it can. Try and say something, Jerry, so we get your picture on.
So
Jerry, something.
There's a demon in the mirror. So you can see him standing there with a rifle on his back, and in the mirror is a demon. He drew this before he killed a bunch of people. And this is one from another schizophrenic. Let's see if we got this. It goes either way.
Help me.
Yeah.
Jerry, I'd like to ask you a question, if you don't mind.
No,
as far as, is there a separation between when the schizophrenics are violent or non-violent? I mean, because I didn't feel any like being violent or anything like that. Do you find there's a difference? What makes one schizophrenic violent and one non-violent?
Well, the ones that I was working with in prison, they were all likely prone to be violent. And what's interesting is when they get angry, they get supernaturally strong. I watched one guy that they pepper sprayed, they shocked, they sicked a dog on, and this guy was just sitting in his cell like nothing was happening. I mean, those 50,000-volt stun guns that they use in the prison, I'd never seen anybody stay on their feet after being hit with that. This guy just stood in the middle of his cell and just shook, And they shot him 13 times before the warden said, "Stop it, because I'm going to get accused of cruel and unusual punishment." So first they pepper sprayed him. He put a towel around his head and just took it off. That didn't bother the guards that were pepper spraying him. They suffered from the stuff coming out of the cell. Then they shocked him, and he just stood in the middle of the cell just shaking. He would not go down. So then they got the attack dogs, and the prisoners are terrified of the attack dogs, because they rip them to pieces. So they told him, "You come out of there, or we're going to sick the attack dog on you." So he said, "Go ahead and sick it." And he's mocking them the whole time, calling them fairies and queers, and just mocking all the guards out there. So they got the attack dog. They sicked him on him. He's sitting on his bed. He throws his arm up in front of his face like that. The dog grabs onto his wrist and bites down to the bone. He's gushing blood, and he pulls the dog's face to him, and he starts petting it and going, good dog, sit." And the dog sat. While the dog's sitting, he's going, good puppy, good puppy. And the dog trainer is standing outside the cell going, "What in the blazes is happening in there?" So when they get mad, they are supernaturally strong. But the voices are telling them to get into trouble. So they're telling them to attack this guy or attack that guy or say something bad. They'll do anything they can to increase the turmoil, the fear, the paranoia. So I think a lot has to do with who the person is in the first place. If they're not violent to start with, it's a lot harder for them to get that person violent.
And ultimately, these voices, the entities behind the negative voices, they're trying to take over the personality of their target.
Yes.
I mean, they're
Yes.
trying to totally wipe out the previous person's character and almost step in. I mean, that's where exorcisms come into play, because these entities, they're trying to take over. They are taking over their targets eventually. That's one of their ultimate goals.
That's right, because once they get complete control, they have, like that picture with the guy, the demon in the mirror. That's one that was taken over, and he murdered a bunch of people. I've only seen one who was completely taken over in my career. Maybe two. Yeah, two. And both of them were very spooky people.
And they had been already maybe a little bit in their personality structure before they became diagnosed as schizophrenics?
Well, I don't know. The both of the ones that I met that way were when I was working doing psych crisis in hospital emergency rooms, and both of them were completely taken over. I had them admitted, they drugged them silly. But yeah, they were, one of them, he was so taken over that every time his family called him by his right name that he was born with, he would get furious, and he would tell them, John is no longer here. John is dead. I'm not John. And he would get violent when they called him by the name that he had when he was sane.
So what do family members do if they suspect that a loved one increasingly become more and more schizophrenic, or have that, going in that direction, and they are just denying it, or are in denial, and what can you do, and what would you suggest people do in that case?
Well, there's usually a lot of trauma in the background. With most schizophrenics, there's a lot of trauma, sexual, mental, physical abuse. That's what they feed off of. And that's what MACE is really good about getting rid of. So once you drain that down to nothing, they have nothing to feed on. So they weaken. And then once you drain their food source, then you can go after them.
Mm-hmm.
So I would suggest they find a MACE therapist. Either contact me or find another MACE therapist that can do something about that stuff. Because in regular psychotherapy, for the most part, it's like shooting a rhino in the butt with a BB rifle. It's not very effective with schizophrenics.
Now, the MACE energy method, it's also a lot less expensive to start with. It's the most least intrusive, because if they go to like a current mainstream psychiatric hospital, they're just going to drug them up.
Yeah, yeah. And what's good about MACE is the therapist doesn't have to know anything about the trauma that caused the turmoil, other than where it happened. It works anyway because it's an energetic psychotherapy. It's not a talk therapy. It works with energy. So what it does is it gets that negative energy that person has, and like you get a battery, you can get a brand new battery, charge it up full. You drain it down to nothing, so there's no electricity in there. You can't charge that battery up again. It's dead. MACE does the same thing with the subconscious. It goes after that big pool of negative energy, drains it down to nothing, and then it's not there anymore. The person will remember the trauma, but it won't bother them.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting, yeah. Important. And we can certainly continue our discussion at some point. I would love to have you back, Jerry. And I just want to end up with Anon, because you spoke of your book and you showed your book, but how can people get it?
It's available on Amazon and a few other places, but I do have a website. It's asteroxrising.com. It's spelled ASTEROXRISING.com. And they can get it in a paperback or an electronic ebook format.
Great. That's wonderful. I want to say that we really appreciate having both of you on, and we want to thank you, Anon, for sharing your story. It's been really fascinating and very great, and probably very helpful for some people to hear this. So thank you very much, Anon, for doing that and being on with us today.
It takes a great bit of courage for people like Anon to speak out in the face of all this bullcrap that's going on with the psychiatric mafia.
I'm glad to be able to share my story, because hopefully it'll help others to realize, hey, there's hope. I can get out of this situation.
Yes, it's wonderful. And Jerry, as always, it's fascinating. It's great to have you on. So thank you both for being on Age of Truth TV.
Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure.
Great. Thank you so much, guys.
Okay, you're more than welcome.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
having us.
Thank you so much to Anon and to Jerry Marsinsky. And thanks to all of you for watching Age of Truth TV. You can support us by clicking onto our website, ageoftruth.tv. And please like our videos, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for notifications. You can sign up for our newsletter on our website, ageoftruth.tv as well. Please also subscribe to our alternative channels on BitChute and Brighteon. Your support is greatly appreciated and very needed. And on behalf of the Age of Truth TV team, we thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.